In 1936, a county archivist in Missouri opened a warped oak cabinet that had not been unlocked since before her father was born. Inside was a cracked register, a packet of land deeds, and one loose sheet pinned through the cover with a rusted needle. For words had been written across it. They dressed the children. Not they ran. Not they were taken. Not they fought. They dressed the children. And once you understand why a mother would button a child into Sunday clothes before stepping out into a war-dark road, the Cedar Bend disappearances stop sounding like folklore. They become something colder. They become a ledger of trust. Between the March thaw and the first hay cutting of 1864, 7 households vanished from Cedar Bend County, Missouri. 52 people in all. Farmers, wives, hired hands, old parents, nursing babies, and children too small to know which side of the war their county was supposed to be on. Their houses were not burned. Their horses were not stolen. Their cupboards were not stripped. The meals were left where the families had meant to eat them. Corn cakes cooling beside a stove. Coffee blackening in a pot. A cradle pushed near the hearth. A sewing needle still threaded and stuck into a sleeve. And in more than one cabin, neighbors noticed the same impossible detail. The children's everyday shoes were still under the bed, but their Sunday shoes were gone. Cedar Bend County sat far enough from the great battlefields that no Eastern newspaper cared what happened there, and close enough to the Missouri border war that every man in the county slept with a firearm within reach. It was a place of small farms and hard-bottom roads, creek timber, limestone shells, hemp patches, muddy wheat ground, and cabins built by families who had arrived from Kentucky and Tennessee before the war had names for their loyalties. The county seat was a 2-street town called Willow Courthouse. It had a brick jail, a dry goods store, a blacksmith shop, a Methodist church, and a federal post that occupied the old academy building at the edge of town. Before the war, people in Cedar Bend knew how to quarrel and still survive one another. A man might refuse to speak to his brother-in-law for 6 months over politics, and still ride out at midnight when that same brother-in-law's child took fever. That was the old rule of the county. The war broke that rule first. By 1864, the ordinary acts of neighborly life had become dangerous. To give a stranger bread might make you a rebel sympathizer. To refuse a Union patrol corn might make you a guerrilla ally. To own a good horse was to invite theft from both flags. And to know the wrong thing about the wrong man could get your name added to a list that nobody admitted keeping. After Quantrill's raid at Lawrence and General Order No. 11, Western Missouri had learned what official emptiness looked like. Whole districts were turned into refugee roads. Families who had owned orchards, barns, and smokehouses in August were sleeping under wagons by October. Some fled because soldiers ordered them to. Some fled because guerrillas promised to return. Some fled because there was no longer a difference between command and threat. Cedar Bend was never named in the order. That mattered on paper. It mattered less on horseback. Captain Elias Crowther, the Union officer commanding the Willow Courthouse post, had been granted what military men like to call discretion. He was 36, precise, soft-spoken, and so careful with his gloves that men joked he would wipe blood off a handshake before he offered it. He had come from Illinois with clean boots, a narrow face, and a private conviction that the border counties could only be governed by frightening them into stillness. People feared Crowther, but at first, most still feared the bushwhackers more. That was how the first family walked out. On the morning of March 18, 1864, a widowed farmer named Abram Hardin failed to meet his neighbor at the lower ford. That alone was enough to worry people. Hardin was known for being early. He was 54, dry as a fence rail, and so punctual that men in Willow Courthouse set store meetings by when his wagon crossed the square. His neighbor, Jonas Pike, rode to the Hardin place before noon. The gate was open. The milk cow was bawling in the lot, heavy with milk. 2 mules stood saddled in the lean-to, but no one had led them out. The kitchen door was closed, not broken, not kicked, simply closed. Pike called from the yard. No answer. Inside, breakfast sat untouched for 6 people. Sliced ham, corn cakes, a jar of sorghum, and a pan of eggs gone cold on the hearthstone. A little tin cup had been placed beside the youngest boy's chair. On the chair itself lay a blue ribbon that his sister wore on Sundays. The beds had been slept in, the trunk lids were shut, the family Bible was still on its shelf, but the pegs beside the door were empty. Abram Hardin's coat was gone. His daughter's shawls were gone. The little boy's Sunday coats were gone. And under the bed, Pike found 3 pairs of rough everyday children's shoes, lined up where the children had left them. Their polished shoes were missing. That was what Pike remembered later. Not the quiet, not the cold food, not even the cow crying in the lot. The shoes. Because a family running from murder does not stop to change a child's shoes. A father dragging children into the woods does not lace them into their best pairs. Whoever came to the Hardin cabin that night had given them enough time to dress, or had spoken with enough authority that dressing seemed like obedience. Sheriff Silas Rowan rode out that afternoon. He searched the yard, the wagon shed, the smokehouse, the spring path. He found no blood, no broken latch, no torn cloth, no scattered cartridges, no sign of a fight. Only 2 wagon ruts on the north road. They were shallow, slow, deliberate. By sunset, Rowan wrote the Hardins into the missing register and left a blank space below the name. He believed he would fill that space within a week. He was wrong. 5 nights later, the Bellows family disappeared from a farm 4 miles south of the Hardins. 8 people. The grandmother, Ruth Bellows, had not been able to leave her bed in 2 years. Her quilts were folded back carefully. The lamp beside her bed had been pinched out, not knocked over. Her medicine spoon lay clean on the saucer. In the main room, supper waited untouched. At the door, her son Micajah's work boots remained where he always left them. His black church boots were gone. Then came the Emorys on April 2nd. 6 people from a ridge farm above Copper Creek. A half-finished cradle board lay on the table. A pot of beans had boiled dry and cracked. Their dog, a brindle cur known to bite anyone outside the family, was found locked in the corn crib, whining but alive. Then the Larch family on April 9th. Then the old Kesterson place on April 17th. Then the Voss household near the school road on April 25th. By the first week of May, Cedar Bend County had stopped making nighttime visits. Women drew water before dusk. Men slept in chairs. Church doors opened on Sunday and almost no one came in. At the dry goods store, flour and lamp oil were sold through a back window because people did not like standing in the street too long. Every family listened for hoofbeats. They were listening for the wrong sound. The sound that mattered was softer. A wagon stopping in the road. A lantern latch lifting. A familiar man saying your name from the porch. A calm voice telling you there was no time to argue, but enough time to get the children dressed. Sheriff Rowan did not understand that yet. What he understood was geography. On May 7th, after the 6th disappearance, he locked himself inside the recorder's office with a county map, 7 deed books, and 3 black pencils borrowed from the schoolmaster. The courthouse windows were open to the spring heat. Outside, soldiers from Crowther's post laughed around the pump. Rowan marked each empty farm with a dark cross. He expected a scatter. He got a line. The vanished farms followed the old survey path from Widow's Ridge down through Copper Creek and across the South Fort Bottom, a narrow natural corridor of firm ground between floodplain and limestone bluff. Before the war, a group of investors had proposed a rail spur through that exact passage to connect the river landing with the iron road being pushed west. The survey had been dismissed as speculation in 1860. By 1864, speculation had become a weapon. Every vanished farm sat beside land recently acquired by a St. Louis concern called Hale, Mercer, and Sloan. The company had bought 43 parcels in Cedar Bend in 22 months, nearly all of them along the projected line. The prices were low, too low. Some sellers were widows, some were men reported to have moved north. Some signatures looked wrong to Rowan even before he compared them against older tax rolls. One name in the company papers made him sit very still. Mercer. Captain Elias Crowther's wife had been born Lydia Mercer. The second name was worse. Sloan. The agent who had witnessed several of the sales was a former county surveyor named Wilbur Sloan, a man who knew every ridge, ford, timber stand, and legal weakness in Cedar Bend County. And Sloan had vanished from public view 6 weeks before the Hardens disappeared. Not missing, just unseen. Rowan began asking quietly. At the Voss place, under a flour bin, he found a packet of letters wrapped in feed sackcloth. They had been written to Daniel Voss by Wilbur Sloan between January and April of 1864. The first letter was businesslike. Hale, Mercer, and Sloan wished to purchase the Voss farm at a fair price. The second raised the offer. The third mentioned that several neighboring families were considering relocation to Illinois under private protection. The fourth letter changed tone. It named Voss's children. It asked whether little Ansel still coughed in cold weather. It reminded Voss that guerrilla bands had recently crossed the county line. It described, with almost tender concern, how hard it was for a father to protect a family when both armies believed every farmhouse concealed an enemy. The fifth letter contained the sentence Rowan would later copy 3 times into his notebook. "We are prepared to remove your household under safe military escort, provided you will not make yourself difficult in a matter already larger than one man's attachment to soil." Larger than one man's attachment to soil. That was how men who wanted land learned to describe the family standing on it. Rowan put the letters in his coat and rode straight to the Federal post. Captain Crowther received him with courtesy. He listened while Rowan described the map, the deeds, the letters, and the company connection. He asked calm questions. He took notes. He did not become angry. That unsettled Rowan more than anger would have. When the sheriff finished, Crowther folded the letters and placed them back on the desk. "Sheriff," he said, "you have found a nest of criminals using military confusion for private gain. That is serious. It must be handled carefully." Then he asked Rowan to wait in the office while he sent for a provost man from Sedalia. Rowan agreed. For 20 minutes he sat beside the window, listening to the noises of the post, boots on boards, harness rings, a horse stamping in mud, a man coughing in the hall. Then Crowther's voice came through the half-open door, not loud, not meant for him. "Before daylight. No public holding. Process the Voss papers with the others." Another voice asked, "And Rowan?" Crowther answered after a pause. "If he will sign, let him live long enough to regret it." Silas Rowan climbed out the office window. A sentry saw him in the yard and shouted. Rowan ran through the laundry shed, vaulted a split rail fence, stole the nearest saddled horse, and rode east with pistol fire cracking through the young leaves behind him. One ball tore through his hat brim. Another struck the cantle of the saddle. He did not stop until the horse went lame at dusk. That night, in a barn loft 12 miles from Willow Courthouse, Rowan wrote a letter to his sister in Boonville. He told her that if his body was found with rebel blame attached to it, she was to believe none of it. He told her the missing families had not been taken by guerrillas. He told her he had seen how the thing worked. The war provided fear. The company provided motive. The uniform provided permission. And neighbors provided the door. The final household disappeared on May 11th. The Arledge family. 12 people counting 2 hired men and a cousin's orphan daughter. Their farm was less than 2 miles from the Federal post. The distance was impossible, unless the killers felt no need to hide from the garrison. When word reached Rowan, he did not ride home. He did not ride to Jefferson City. He understood now that paper could be intercepted, testimony could be buried, and a lone sheriff could be named a traitor before he reached the next county. He rode instead to the cabin of an old cooper named Eli Judd. Judd lived below Widow's Ridge, near the abandoned saltpeter works, at a place locals called Deacon's Mouth. The name came from a black opening in the limestone, where men had once dug nitrate earth for powder, and then quit when the roof shifted and flooded the lower shaft. Children were warned away from it. Hogs disappeared there. Once, before the war, a mule broke loose and went down the sink path. Men heard it screaming under the ground until dark and never found it. Judd was 71 and mostly blind in one eye. He had supplied barrels to half the county and owed favors to the other half. When Rowan arrived near midnight, Judd let him in without a word. The sheriff laid the letters on the table. Judd listened. At dawn, the old man took his coat down and said, "I can show you where the wagons go." They rode through low fog toward Deacon's Mouth. The road narrowed into a track. Cedar roots crossed the ground like knuckles. At the edge of the limestone sink, Rowan saw fresh wheel scars cut into the mud. Not one set, many. Heavy wagons had backed to the same place over and over. The air smelled of wet stone, horse sweat, and something bitter. Judd led him down a side path to a shelf of rock above the flooded opening. There, in the dirt beside the wheel marks, were small things nobody had bothered to see. A brass button from a child's coat, a strip of blue ribbon, a woman's hair comb snapped in half, a torn corner of printed paper, browned by mud. Rowan picked up the paper. It was a relocation certificate. At the bottom was the seal of Hale, Mercer, and Sloan. Judd's hands shook as he spoke. He had seen wagons there 3 times. Always after midnight, always with a lantern hung low on the lead board. The people in the wagons were quiet, not bound, at least not when he saw them. Some sat wrapped in blankets. Once he heard a child ask if Illinois would have peaches. A man in the wagon answered that it would, if the Lord allowed it. Then soldiers ordered Judd away from his own path. The last time he hid in the cedars. He saw Wilbur Sloan standing with a ledger under his arm. He saw Sergeant Martin Crowther, the captain's younger brother, holding a pistol at his side. He saw men unload trunks first, then people. He saw papers placed on a barrel head and hands guided to make marks by lantern light. What happened after that, Judd would only say once. He said the sink took sound strangely. A shout could fall into it and come back smaller. Rowan stood above the black mouth in the rock and understood the county at last. The families had been told a raid was coming. They had been told their names appeared on a guerrilla retaliation list, or a federal suspect list, or both. They had been told the garrison could not protect scattered farms after dark, but could move loyal households under safe escort to a refugee depot. They had been told to bring deeds, coats, blankets, silver if they had any, and children dressed properly for travel. Some may have signed willingly. Some may have signed while a pistol rested near the ink. Some may not have signed at all. But the marks existed, and by morning, the land belonged to the company. The bodies belonged to the sink. The explanation belonged to the war. That was the genius of the crime. It did not need to invent terror. It borrowed terror already loose in the county and put a business seal on it. Rowan returned with Judd to the old cooper's cabin. For 9 hours, he wrote. He copied the company letters from memory. He listed every parcel. He named Crowther, Mercer, Sloan, and the sergeant. He drew a map of Deacon's Mouth. He recorded the dates of the vanishings and the objects found in each house. Then he wrote the 4 words that made the archivist go cold. 72 years later, they dressed the children. Not because he thought the detail explained everything, because it condemned everyone. It proved that the families did not believe they were walking into murder. They believed they were preparing for evacuation. They trusted the rhythm of authority. They trusted the familiar voice. They trusted the idea that a man who told you to button a child's coat was helping you keep that child alive. Rowan sealed his notes in a flour tin, wrapped the tin in tarred cloth, and hid it beneath the false bottom of Judd's wagon bed. Judd was to carry it to a lawyer in Boonville as soon as the roads cleared. Rowan rode alone toward the state capitol the next morning. He made it 31 miles. His body was found beside a creek road on May 16, 1864, shot twice in the back and once behind the ear. The official report blamed unknown guerrillas. His horse was gone. His coat was gone. The Voss letters were gone. His wedding ring was returned to his widow by military courier in an envelope that had no signature. The county clerk, a nervous bachelor named Merritt, wrote the final missing register after Rowan's death. He had helped Rowan compare deeds. He knew enough to be afraid and not enough to be safe. In June, Vail locked the Cedar Bend register inside the courthouse cabinet and sent a copy of the index to Jefferson City, where it disappeared into a state storage room. 3 weeks later, Vail was found dead in the records office, with his head on his desk and an overturned bottle of patent sleeping drops beside his hand. The coroner called it misadventure brought on by exhaustion. The cabinet was sealed. The county kept living. That may be the ugliest sentence in the whole story. The county kept living. People harvested. Women baked. Men repaired fences. Children were born into houses where nobody spoke after dark. The empty farms were sold for taxes, transferred through company hands, absorbed into larger holdings. In 1882, when the South Fork Spur was finally built, the rail line ran almost exactly where the old survey had predicted. Hale, Mercer, and Sloan sold the corridor at a profit that turned 3 family fortunes into dynasties. Captain Elias Crowther resigned honorably after the war. He became a claims attorney in Illinois, then a judge, then a man whose obituary praised his firmness in troubled times. Wilbur Sloan died in St. Louis in 1897, with railroad stock in his estate and a silver watch believed to have belonged to Daniel Voss. Sergeant Martin Crowther disappeared west after a barroom killing and was never tried for anything in Missouri. Deacon's Mouth was fenced, then forgotten. A quarry company blasted part of the ridge in 1911, collapsing the outer shelf. Whatever lay under the flooded works became unreachable without equipment nobody had reason to bring, and the story became a ghost tale. By the early 20th century, children in Cedar Bend whispered that the empty farms set their own tables at night. They said a woman in a travel bonnet walked the railroad embankment, looking for a station that was never built. They said dogs refused to cross the old Sink Road after sunset. Folklore did what it often does. It turned evidence into atmosphere. It made the truth easier to survive by making it sound less possible. Then, in the summer of 1936, a works progress archivist named Alma Breen came to Willow Courthouse to catalog old county records before the building was renovated. She was 28, practical, unmarried, and known for treating dirty paper with more respect than living officials sometimes received. The oak cabinet in the records room had swollen shut. The county judge told her there was nothing important inside. Old tax lists, rotten petitions, dead men's clutter. Breen insisted. A blacksmith pried the lock. Inside, behind 2 shelves of mold-spotted road warrants, she found Merritt Vail's missing register. The paper had foxed at the edges. Several pages were stuck together, and pinned inside the cover was the sheet with Rowan's words. They dressed the children. Breen did not stop there. The register referred to a second container entrusted to E. Judd. No one in the courthouse knew what that meant, but county probate files showed Judd's wagon and tools had been sold after his death in 1868 to a farmer west of town. Breen traced the property through 3 families and found the remains of the old wagon in a collapsed machine shed used for kindling storage. Under a warped plank in the wagon bed, she found the flour tin. The cloth around it had nearly rotted away. The notes inside had survived. For 6 months, Alma Breen copied names, compared deeds, and wrote to archives in St. Louis, Jefferson City, Boonville, and Springfield. She found company transfers. She found forged signatures. She found railroad sale records. She found the military roster of Crowther's Post, including Sergeant Martin Crowther's detached duty on the nights when 3 families vanished. She did not find bodies. No one ever did. But history is not made only of bones. Sometimes, it is made of land records, wagon marks, mismatched signatures, frightened letters, and a child's brass button pulled from the mud beside a hole no decent person wanted to look into. Breen sent her report to the State Historical Board in December of 1936. The board praised her diligence. Then it declined publication. The reason, stated privately, was that the matter rested on painful allegations against families still active in banking, law, and state politics. The public record, the board wrote, should not be used to inflame old grief when no judicial remedy remained. That was how Cedar Bend was buried the second time, not by soldiers, not by land agents, by polite men in clean rooms who agreed that truth had become inconvenient too late to matter. But it did matter. It mattered to Abram Hardin's daughters, who were told to put on their good shoes. It mattered to Ruth Bellows, carried from her bed under a promise of safety. It mattered to the Voss child who asked whether Illinois had peaches. It mattered to Silas Rowan, who died trying to turn fear into evidence. It mattered because the crime was not only murder and theft. It was the deliberate use of civilization's trusted gestures to commit uncivilized things. A knock at the door, a lantern held low, a uniform in the yard, a paper with a seal, a neighbor's voice saying, "There is danger coming, and I know the road out." The deepest horror in Cedar Bend County was not that 52 people disappeared. It was that they were given time to prepare, time to fold blankets, time to lift old women from beds, time to gather deeds, time to hush crying babies, time to lace polished shoes onto children who thought they were being taken somewhere safer. And somewhere between the warm cabin and the black mouth in the limestone, every one of them learned what the 4 words really meant. They dressed the children.